You're listening to the MatchKitCast with me, Ben Karpinski, bringing you closer to the athletes on the MatchKit.co platform. Welcome to this edition of the MatchKit Cast. We have Annah Watkinson with us. Now, if you are in the triathlon endurance sports circles, Annah, of course, will be a very well-known individual here in South Africa and beyond. She's been at the top of her game, essentially, for the last 10 years. And someone that we're proud to have on the MatchKit profile. You can find Annah at matchkit.co/Annah. That's ANNAHB and 247. That is her profile, which you can look up on, of course, get all her social media and connection points. Today's story, however, isn't quite how Annah would have maybe wanted to end last year. So I wanted to start this year. Annah, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Ben. I'm looking forward to catching up with you.
So December came around last year. We all had a pretty, well, let's just say less than ideal 2020. Didn't go to plan for any of us, I think. But when I, on your Instagram profile, saw what you posted, I was absolutely horrified. We all know that endurance athletes have to train in a variety of settings, whether it be indoor, in a pool. You obviously cycle, you run, and you need to get outside from time to time. And there's no real easy way of introducing this, but you are lucky to be here today. Would you mind just sort of painting us a bit of a picture around this?
Absolutely. Yeah, I woke up on a Saturday morning ready for a full day of training, as Saturdays tend to be for most of us that do the endurance sport. I suppose most of us that are working kind of keep the majority of our long runs and our long bikes for the weekend. So I had a three-pronged approach. I was starting with a run, I was off to a swim, and then I was going to be doing a bike. So I got up fairly early, headed out the door, and about 300 meters into my run, I got hit by a taxi, and pretty much that was the last I remember, was seeing the taxi and lying on the floor, and then in and out of the trauma room, and then in the surgery for about 2.5 hours at Christian Barnard. So yeah, it was emotionally very overwhelming and physically quite devastating impact before Christmas and to end off 2020 for myself.
Now, when I first saw this, obviously you had quite a long descriptor into what happened, and you just sort of, well, you don't really have much of a recollection from it. Is anything sort of in your mind how this sort of transpired? Because obviously you are an experienced athlete. It's not like you don't know, you mitigate your risk accordingly as far as being out there in traffic. What essentially did actually happen on the morning?
Yeah, I'm actually quite fastidious about making sure that when I run on the pavement, that I'm not running on the road. And then if I am ever on the road as a result of lack of pavements around the area, I'm facing oncoming traffic, and that gives you, as a runner, line of sight to traffic. I saw a taxi quite far in the distance, made the judgment call that I had sufficient time to cross the road, but always whenever I cross a road, I keep my eye on the oncoming traffic. I just thought, wow, this guy's coming fast and you better sprint. And that was pretty much the last thoughts that went through my head. And the only reason I was crossing the road is because the pavement finishes on one side and continues on the other side. And as I said, I'm fastidious about being on the pavement. To your point, I think when we go out, we're taking risk by being out and doing this activity. You must never lay a risk, and you always take certain precautions to mitigate that risk. And so I am a very conservative person by nature. And in fact, you can ask anyone that has ridden downhill with me when I'm literally holding onto the brakes nonstop. So yeah, it's and as a result of the accident, I think I've got PTSD. I was discussing it with my doctor, and I'm just very, very even more heightened to the mistakes that runners, cyclists, pedestrians, vehicles make all the time. I've seen just the other day a pedestrian crossing the road looking at the phone whilst a car was stopping at the robot, but on the phone sending a voice note, and two people head down in their cell phones, not aware of each other. It's just the risk of it is just so high. This is your life. It's not just a, you know, it's not a broken bone. It is literally the rest of your life that you could lose.
Sure. So, as you say, you don't really have a huge amount of recollection of what happened. Your final sort of thoughts and memories were trying very hard to kind of just make sure you're away from this car. Did the car actually physically leave the road and veer towards the pavement, and what caused this?
So yeah, I mean, again, I don't have all the details because I was highly concussed. I think I was out for about 10 or so minutes, but I was actually the taxi, so the minibus taxi ramped the pavement and landed into the complex gates. I think in an attempt to avoid me. I mean, no one is out there trying to hurt anyone, and I just think that we just are careless and ignorant, and that's what happens. And I was on the side, literally at the wall of the pavement, lying. I was thrown about 5 meters from where the taxi was to where I sort of woke up in and out of consciousness. What is amazing is the number of people around. So we had there were a couple of cyclists that stopped. There were runners. There were people that saw it outside of their complex, ran across, and they were all kind of holding me and looking after me. And I've only pretty much pieced this together subsequently with a couple of discussions. So things that they were saying to me was, that have been told to me from them was, I was saying, this can't be true, this isn't real, this is just a dream, this is just a dream. And apparently somebody asked me if I had felt any pain, and I said yes, my back. But again, I don't recall much of it. I sort of was in and out, saw all these people, the very kind people. My partner came because he was told, I have a Garmin, and in the Garmin, I put my emergency contact. And your emergency contact, when I think it's a decelerator, I don't know the technology around it, but when you fall, it sends a message with a geolocation of where that happened, and it sent it to him together with one of the cyclists having gone. Apparently, I was lucid enough to give my address, which I don't recall, to the cyclist, and they called my partner, and he came to the accident. And then I remember being put into the ambulance. Don't remember the ambulance trip, and yeah, then I remember a lot of awful things, but mostly the pain was mitigated, I think, through the adrenaline and the huge amounts of painkillers and morphine that they were pumping through my body. But stitches in the back of my head, staples. Had to have a COVID test, of course, lying in the trauma room. Yeah.
So when the dust kind of settles, so to speak, obviously, as you say, adrenaline's pumping, you're in shock, you're in disbelief, as you said as well. What were your sort of thoughts when you became a bit more lucid around this, when you became a little bit more with it? Did you had a pain in your back, was your mind going to places where you thought that maybe this could be it, you wouldn't be able to walk again?
Thankfully, it didn't. I don't think I ever reached any of those dark points, and I think that's just my mind in general. I typically don't go to worst case scenario. I tend to go to best case scenario in most of how I lead my life, and I think that's very important, is to have this hugely positive mindset. What is very interesting is, as an endurance athlete, I think we put our bodies under a lot of stress, that it's constantly in recovery mode, and definitely the way that I've trained, that you almost always, after a session, your body is in recovery. And so when the doctor took my inflammation markers and my white blood cell count, she noted that my body hadn't actually, my trauma levels were just above normal. In other words, my body hadn't actually gone, oh wow, this is a traumatic experience. It was almost like, this is a hard training session, I better start recovering, versus, I suppose, Joe Average on the roads. So to all those endurance athletes out there that do this, know that you're almost preparing yourself for the worst outcome, but also that you're constantly in recovery. I think when I came to, it was weird things that I thought about. Oh, I better tell my swim squad why I missed the squad, but actually I'll get back there. Or I better just let Jane or whatever know that I can't make the run tomorrow. It was more like, okay, this is the admin that I need to do, more so than oh goodness, this is this is kind of could be unable to walk. I didn't actually ever get that. I think that has come subsequently when I've seen the medical reports, and I've had time to process it. So physically, I've been able to sort of start really working on it. It's something really in my control and how I can improve. And I'm very lucky that I've got the guidance of both my coach and my doctor. And then I think the mental side, that's almost come later to go, goodness, these are the possible outcomes, and not just, I think I, similarly to yourself, default into, oh, this potentially could have been, I could have been paralyzed. I could be dead. But one of the things that somebody said to me was like, well, you could have been brain damaged. And true, I could have been. I hit my head really hard. I've had staples and stitches in the back. I had some stitches in the front of my face. And I actually hadn't even thought of that. The realm of the possible outcomes that could have happened are just so enormous. And you start playing like, was this my fault? Whose fault was it? I put myself out in that position, etc. And all the things that you can't control, but you've always got to play those scenarios out to what actually did happen and where you ended up, and just be incredibly grateful and positive, for the future.
So just to kind of take stock, what was the full extent of your injuries from this?
If you imagine a movie scene in which your head crashes against the windscreen and your body into the body of the car, that was really what I did. And it was all on the left-hand side, and then through, and I landed on my back. So on the left-hand side, I broke my 11th and 12th rib, the transverse process, which are at the bottom, which are the bones that come off the spine and not the spine itself. So the muscle, how it attaches to the spine, those little bones, broke. I found out subsequent to coming out of hospital that I broke my fibula, and that's just because it's not as a significant weight-bearing muscle, and obviously I was on my back most of the time in hospital. Staples and stitches in the back of my head, so I've got a little bit of a shaved patch, but thankfully long enough hair to cover that. Some stitches in the front of my face. This is the most embarrassing but also quite significant one, is that I don't know if I landed on something funny or my legs split apart, but I tore my anus muscle, and they've had to stitch that back together. And that's quite a hard one to deal with, because people aren't aware of that, but it's really tough.
Sure.
And then obviously a hell of a lot of bruised muscle, bones. And if you look at my spine or the back, I've got these big roasties where the skin has come on. They're quite deep, and it looks like it's each on each sort of part of the spine. So it looks like I've just got these round dots. Somebody asked if I had a tattoo, and I was like, what an odd tattoo, but each to their own. So yes, those are the extent or summary of the injuries.
So we're around sort of 7 weeks post this now, and obviously knowing the spirit that you do attack life with, an athlete that you are, there is obviously a goal. There's obviously a way of rehabbing. How has it been since getting through this and becoming more mobile? Like, what have your movements been of late?
It's been quite an incredible journey, because I think when I first, so not due to COVID, no one was able to visit me during my time in hospital, and I was there. So then ICU for three days, and then in the general ward up until the Friday. The doctor was very kind, saying, please, you're welcome to stay. We're not forcing you home, because home can be quite difficult. You feel you're almost allowed to be ill in hospital, whereas when you get home, you kind of need to start carrying on with life. But they'd started cordoning it off, the general ward, for COVID. And again, in an unlucky accident, very lucky that it happened literally the week before the second wave. And so I thought, no, it's about time that I head home. And whilst I was in hospital, it would take me probably about 20 to 30 minutes to get out of the bed. I had huge searing pains, and then to get back in the bed would take another 20 to 30 minutes, just because you use your back a lot, and it was heavily bruised, and the muscle that attaches to the transverse process would almost spasm. And I've got to remind myself of that, because then I got out of hospital on that Friday, and I got into the car but I was able to get into the car and I was able to get out the car and I was standing, and a lot of people kind of that came to visit, and I had many very kind friends that sent me flowers. I promise you, for the first 2 weeks, I didn't have to cook a meal, which was amazing, and I ate like a queen. But when they would come and visit, they were surprised to see me able to stand. And I don't know, the expectation, I think, was that I would be sort of man down, and that was it. What I did have was a lot of fatigue, and I think that was my body just healing. So I'd go for like 2-hour naps. I'd be in bed by 7 and wake up at 9, which is, if anyone knows me, very unusual, because I usually tend to burn the candle at both ends to fit my whole life into a day. But I took it as that, and really was happy to take the guidance of my coach, in which it was, okay, well, let's aqua jog, and go for a little walk, and little things like that. And slowly I started seeing progressions, and then it all almost kind of started happening a little bit faster. And so I got a little bit excited, and I'd push the limits, and my coach would pull me back. No, let's take it a little bit easier. And I'm glad that he did that, because, you know, I think when you push yourself, or when you sort of challenging yourself, pain doesn't always show its face in the form of, oh, this is sore. It can actually show its face in terms of, I'm so exhausted, I can't get up tomorrow morning, or I need to go to sleep almost instantly at this moment. And I was suffering the latter, and I was needing a lot of rest and recovery. But it has progressed quite fast, faster than I expected, and I think faster than a lot of people have expected, which is hugely rewarding. And I think it's hugely rewarding given where I've come from in terms of having put in those hours of training. It's never lost. I think people sometimes think, oh, I'm going to lose that time, I'm going to lose that fitness. And yes, you're not as fit as you were at that point, but that ability to have been there, and that ability to push those limits, it comes quicker than you know. And so rather rest and recover and take the downtime, because I can already see the intensity of my training is starting to pick up, and I'm like, whoa, okay, how am I going to start fitting this in the day? As exciting as that is, it is also a bit of a sort of juggling act day by day. So I'm that's a very long-winded answer to your question, but I'm excited that I've progressed quite quickly. Like you said, just over seven weeks. They say you typically 6 to 8 weeks is recovery, and then you should start looking at building some strength. And it just goes to show how strong we are as athletes, not only physically but mentally as well, to move forward quite quickly when you are injured and or sore. But again, like I said, under the guidance of both coach and doctor.
It's a very good point that you make. I mean, just for like sort of non-athletes or people obviously nowhere near your level, you have the ability to bounce back from setbacks in life when you are that much stronger physically and mentally. So, it reminds us that stuff's going to happen to us, hopefully not to the extent it's happened to you, but if we're fit and strong, ultimately we will recover a little bit faster. Just on you said you had obviously a break of the fibula. Have you been able to kind of progress past a walk yet? Because obviously getting into the pool is one thing, getting onto a bike is another, but impacts and all that kind of stuff. What's your sort of running timeline in your mind, getting back on that?
So my coach has put in some runs this week. This will be the first one. I think I have my first run tomorrow. And I wouldn't really call it a run if you'd asked me a couple of months ago, if that was or should I say weeks ago. But it's more like a walk with a, 1 minute, 7-minute K, faster run, cut back to a walk, etc. So that the timeline is kind of this week we start introducing that. I have been doing a lot on the step machine at the gym, given that it isn't as impactful as running, but keeps your strength. So my coach's philosophy and under our umbrella is having a strong athlete and making, we do a lot of strength training within each of the disciplines of triathlon, and we believe for an Ironman that is what is most important. And so doing those steps has hopefully built some strength that I'll be able to cross over into running and then just work on the fitness of side of that.
Alrighty, so obviously, like your December training is relatively intense to get ready for like your next calendar year, so to speak. World Champs October was very much your goal back then. How are you now looking at your year? Obviously, considering what has transpired.
So yeah, Ironman Kona World Champs is still the goal. I think my my the qualification, if I can call it, has to be a little bit delayed. So typically I would look for an Ironman earlier in the season, given that it's a southern hemisphere summer, and it's great training. And also in December, being our summer holidays, we got a little bit more time to put in the intensity and the effort. And I typically look at doing Ironman South Africa, which has been postponed. So I was looking at doing Ironman Texas, which was in April. I'm not going to be ready for that. So I'll look to do an Ironman in the middle of the year where I've had time to properly recover and properly build up the fitness to be able to be competitive at that level. The only thing, the positive of that is, there are a number of different Ironmans internationally, and hopefully post, the pandemic opens up, or sort of the vaccines are rolled out quite fast, and the pandemic doesn't hold us back from as many races as it did in 2020, and we're able to do a little bit more. And then I think, like I said, if you start earlier and you don't qualify at an earlier Ironman, it does give you the opportunity to qualify, mid-year and then a little bit later, but you don't want to get too close to Kona and without having qualified yet. So that would be the only drawback, but I think it just makes the hunger and deep desire to push forward a whole lot more, and focus on those June, July races.
Well, and I have absolutely no doubt you are going to get back in there. You've had setbacks before, and like I said at the start, you've been in the top of your game for quite some time. As severe as this is, and as sort of taxing as it's going to be going forward, I just find that you've got an incredible spirit about you and your positivity straight away, and to know what you're capable of, it really is quite something. If you want to find out more about Anna's journey towards this, now that she has publicly put it out that she will be at World Champs, so we're all going to hold you to it. matchkit.co/Anna B247, and then there's Anna spelled ANNAH. Anna, thanks so much for your time today. It's you are a natural inspiration, and you are someone who lives a very full life. I wish you nothing but the best with your recovery.
Thanks, Ben, and thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Cool. Chat soon. Bye. Are you an athlete looking to better commercialize your career? Visit MatchKit.co and see what this unique web builder can do for your sporting profile.